He discovered a horse tied to a tree with a baby blanket. The note whispered, "Please save him." The evening sun was slowly sinking behind the wide, empty plains. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and red, and the dry wind carried dust across the lonely trail. Elias Crow rode his horse at a steady pace, his eyes calm but always watching. He was a man of few words, known for keeping to himself and avoiding trouble whenever he could. Elias had spent most of his life on the road. He had seen small towns rise and fall, met people who came and went, and learned not to ask too many questions. Life had taught him that silence was often safer than curiosity. That evening felt like any other. His horse, Ranger, suddenly slowed down. Elias noticed the change right away. Ranger was a strong and steady animal, not the kind to hesitate without reason. Elias gently pulled the reins and looked ahead. There, not too far from the trail, stood a tree. It was old and slightly bent, the only tree in that dry stretch of land. And tied to it was another horse. Elias frowned. It wasn't normal to see a horse tied alone in a place like this. Travelers didn't leave animals behind, not unless something was wrong. The horse looked restless, shifting its feet and shaking its head as if it had been waiting for a long time. "Easy now," Elias muttered softly as he guided Ranger closer. The closer he got, the more details he noticed. The horse was well kept, not wild. Its saddle was still on, and something was draped over it, a small bundle of cloth. Elias climbed down slowly, his boots touching the dry ground with a soft crunch. He moved carefully, his eyes scanning the area. Years on the road had made him cautious. An empty place could still hide danger. The tied horse let out a soft sound, almost like a cry for help. Elias stepped closer. The cloth on the saddle. It was a baby blanket. That didn't make sense. He reached out and touched it. The fabric was soft and clean, not something meant for the rough life of the plains. It looked out of place, like it belonged somewhere safe and warm. Then he noticed something else. A small piece of paper was pinned to the blanket. Elias paused for a moment before taking it. His hands were rough, but he handled the paper carefully, as if it might break. He unfolded it slowly. The writing was uneven, like it had been written in a hurry or with shaking hands. "Please save him." Elias stared at the words. "That's it?" he whispered to himself. No name, no explanation, just those 3 words. He looked around again, this time more carefully. The land stretched far in every direction. No houses, no wagons, no people, just silence. "If there's a him," Elias said quietly, "then where is he?" The wind picked up slightly, making the tree branches creak. The tied horse shifted again, turning its head toward the rocky hills not far away. Elias noticed that. The horse wasn't just nervous, it was looking somewhere. Following its gaze, Elias saw faint marks on the ground, tracks. They were not very clear, but they were there. Boot prints. Someone had been walking or maybe running away from the tree. Elias knelt down to get a better look. The tracks were uneven and quick, like whoever made them was in a hurry. There were also deeper marks, as if something heavy had been carried. Elias stood up slowly. "This ain't right," he said under his breath. He looked back at the note in his hand. The simple words now felt heavier than before. Someone had left a horse, a blanket, and a message, trusting that a stranger would come along and help. That stranger was now him. Elias took a deep breath and tied his own horse next to the tree. He made sure both animals were secure before turning toward the direction of the tracks. He didn't rush. Instead, he moved carefully, step by step, his eyes focused on the ground. The trail led toward a narrow path between the rocks, a small canyon. Elias knew places like that. They could be dangerous, easy to hide in, easy to trap someone. He placed the note in his pocket and adjusted his hat. "Whoever you are," he murmured, "you better still be alive." As he walked closer to the canyon, the air felt different, quieter. He could hear his own footsteps more clearly now. Then, just as he reached the edge of the rocky path, he stopped. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but then he heard it again, a soft sound, weak, but real. It sounded like a cry. Elias froze for a moment, listening carefully. His heart beat a little faster now. There was no doubt. Somewhere ahead, inside that canyon, a baby was crying. Elias's eyes sharpened, and his expression changed from calm to serious. The note was real. The danger was real. And whatever was waiting inside that canyon, he was about to face it. Elias stood at the edge of the canyon, listening closely. The soft crying came again, carried by the still air. It was weak, like the baby had been crying for a long time. He did not waste another second. With slow and careful steps, Elias moved into the narrow path between the rocks. The canyon walls were tall and close, blocking the light of the setting sun. Shadows stretched across the ground, making everything harder to see. Elias kept one hand near his side, ready if trouble appeared. His eyes moved from the ground to the rocks and back again. Every sound mattered now. The crying grew a little louder. "That's it. Keep going," Elias whispered to himself. He followed the tracks deeper inside. The footprints were clearer here, 2 different sets, both from grown men, and between them were marks in the dirt, like something had been dragged or carried carefully. Elias felt a quiet anger building inside him. 2 men and a baby, he muttered. That don't sit right. As he walked further, he noticed something else. Fresh boot marks going in different directions. The trail was not simple anymore. It looked like the men had stopped and argued or changed their plan. Then he heard voices. Elias stopped immediately and lowered himself behind a large rock. He stayed still, listening. "We should have left it back there," one man said in a low, rough voice. "And let someone find it?" another replied. "Use your head. We finish this. We get paid." Elias's eyes narrowed. They were talking about the baby. He slowly leaned forward, just enough to see them. 2 men stood near a small open space between the rocks. Their clothes were dusty and worn, and both looked tired but alert. One of them paced back and forth, clearly nervous. The other stood still, keeping watch. On the ground between them was a small bundle. The baby. The crying was weaker now, almost fading. Elias felt his chest tighten. He had seen many things in his life, but this was different. A child, alone and in danger, left in the hands of men who clearly did not care. The pacing man kicked a small stone. "I don't like this," he said. "Too quiet. Feels wrong." The other man shrugged. "You worry too much. No one comes out here." Elias gave a small, quiet breath. "That's where you're wrong," he thought. He looked around quickly, planning his next move. The space was tight. No easy way in or out. If things went bad, there would be no place to hide. But he could not wait. The baby needed help now. Elias stood up slowly and stepped out from behind the rock. "That's far enough," he said in a calm, steady voice. Both men froze. They turned quickly, surprised to see him. For a moment, no one moved. The nervous man stepped back. "Who are you?" "Someone who don't like what he's seeing," Elias replied. The second man's eyes hardened. "You picked the wrong place to walk into, cowboy." Elias did not react. His gaze stayed fixed on the baby. "Step away from the child," he said. "Nice and easy." The men looked at each other. The nervous one shifted his weight, clearly unsure. But the other man slowly reached toward his side. Elias noticed that small movement. "Don't," Elias said firmly. The air felt heavy. Even the wind had gone quiet. For a second it seemed like they might listen. But then, the man moved fast. Elias reacted just as quickly. He stepped forward, grabbing the man's arm before he could do anything. The two struggled for a moment, boots scraping against the dirt. The nervous man backed away, unsure what to do. Hey, stop!" he shouted, but he did not step in. Elias kept his balance and pushed the man away, forcing him back against the rock. The fight was short, but tense. Elias had more control, more focus. The second man looked at the situation and made a quick choice. He turned and ran. Within seconds, he disappeared deeper into the canyon. "Coward," the first man muttered under his breath, now clearly shaken. Elias did not chase. His attention returned to the baby. The man in front of him raised his hand slightly. "I ain't looking for more trouble," he said. "Then walk," Elias replied. The man did not argue. He slowly backed away, then turned and hurried off in the opposite direction. Soon, the canyon was quiet again. Only one sound remained, the soft, weak crying. Elias moved quickly now. He knelt beside the bundle and carefully picked it up. The baby was small, wrapped tightly in the blanket, face red and tired. "Easy now. You're all right," Elias said gently. The baby's cries softened just a little, as if it could feel the change. Elias looked around one more time, making sure no one else was there. Then he stood up, holding the child carefully in his arms. The note, the horse, the tracks. It all made sense now, but one question remained in his mind. Who left you out here? And why? With that thought, Elias turned back toward the canyon entrance. The danger was not fully gone, but the child was safe, for now. Elias walked carefully through the canyon, the baby held close in his arms. The small child had stopped crying now, but his breathing was still uneven. Elias could feel how weak he was. "Hold on, little one," Elias said softly. "You're safe now." The path out of the canyon felt longer than before. Every sound made Elias alert. He knew one of the men had run deeper inside. That meant trouble could still return. He kept moving. The sky above the canyon had started to darken. The sun was almost gone now, and the shadows were growing deeper. It would not be long before night covered everything. As Elias reached closer to the canyon entrance, the baby made a small sound again. Not a cry, just a soft movement. Elias adjusted the blanket gently, making sure the child was warm. Then, a sound stopped him. Footsteps. Elias froze. They were not far, slow, careful. Someone was coming back. Elias quickly stepped to the side and moved behind a large rock. He stayed quiet, holding the baby close so he would not make noise. The footsteps grew louder. After a few seconds, the man who had run away earlier appeared. He was breathing hard, looking around nervously. But this time, he was not alone. 2 more men walked behind him. Elias's eyes narrowed. So he went for help, Elias thought. The first man pointed ahead. "He's here somewhere. I told you. He came out of nowhere." One of the new men spoke in a calm but cold voice. "Then we find him." Elias looked down at the baby for a moment. Things had just become harder. 3 men now, and a narrow canyon with no easy escape. Elias knew he could not run, not with a baby in his arms. The ground was rough, and one wrong step could be dangerous. He needed to think. Fast. The men spread out slightly, searching between the rocks. "He couldn't have gone far," one said. Elias looked around quietly. Then he saw it. A narrow path to the left. It was small, almost hidden between the rocks. Maybe not easy to walk through, but enough to pass carefully. He took a slow breath. This is the only way, he thought. Holding the baby close, Elias moved quietly toward that path. Each step was slow and careful. The rocks were tight, and he had to turn sideways at some points. Behind him, the men kept searching. "I hear something," one of them said suddenly. Elias stopped. The baby shifted slightly in his arms. For a moment, everything felt still. Then one of the men walked closer to where Elias had been hiding before. "Over here!" he shouted. They had found the spot. Elias did not wait anymore. He moved faster through the narrow path, ignoring the rough edges of the rocks. His shoulder brushed against the stone, but he kept going. "Hey, he's moving!" A voice shouted behind him. Footsteps followed. Elias's heart started beating faster, but his face stayed calm. "Just a little more," he whispered. The narrow path opened slightly ahead. Elias stepped out into a wider space that led toward the canyon exit, but the men were close now. Too close. Elias turned quickly and looked around. He spotted a small rise in the ground, a higher position between rocks. He moved toward it and carefully placed himself there. Now he had a better view. The first man appeared, climbing out of the narrow path. He looked tired but determined. "There!" he shouted. The others followed. Elias stood still, holding the baby securely with one arm. "Stop right there!" Elias said firmly. The men paused. "You're outnumbered," one of them said. "Hand over the child." Elias shook his head slightly. "Not happening." The wind moved through the canyon again, carrying dust across the ground. For a moment, no one moved. Then Elias spoke again, his voice calm but strong. "This ends here. Walk away." The men looked at each other. They were unsure now. Elias did not look afraid. He stood steady, like a man who had made his decision. The baby made a small sound again, and Elias adjusted his hold gently. That small moment changed something. The men saw it. This was not just a fight. This was someone protecting a life. The man who had first run stepped back slightly. "This ain't worth it," he muttered. One of the others frowned. "We came this far." "And for what?" the first man said. "It's over." There was a long pause. Then, slowly, one by one, they stepped back. No one wanted to take the next step forward. Finally, they turned and walked away. Elias watched them carefully until they disappeared into the canyon. Only then did he let out a slow breath. The danger was gone. For real this time. Elias looked down at the baby. "You did good," he said quietly. The child was calm now, resting in his arms. The night had fully arrived, and the first stars were starting to show in the sky above the canyon. Elias turned and walked toward the exit. Every step felt lighter now. He had made his choice, and nothing was going to change it. As he stepped out of the canyon, the open land welcomed him again, but this time, he was not alone anymore. The night was calm and quiet as Elias stepped out of the canyon. The cool air touched his face, and the wide sky above was filled with stars. In his arms, the baby rested quietly, wrapped in the soft blanket. Elias walked back toward the lonely tree where everything had started. Both horses were still there. Ranger stood steady as always, while the other horse lifted its head as soon as Elias came closer. It let out a soft sound, almost like it was asking a question. Elias gave a small nod. "He's safe," he said quietly. He carefully untied Ranger first, then checked the other horse. It looked tired but strong. Whoever owned it had taken good care of it. Elias looked at the saddle again. Earlier, he had only noticed the blanket and the note, but now, under the moonlight, he decided to check more carefully. He opened the small saddlebag. Inside, there were only a few things: a little food, a water flask, and something small wrapped in cloth. Elias picked it up and slowly unwrapped it. It was a locket. He opened it gently. Inside was a tiny picture of a woman holding a baby. The same baby, Elias realized. The woman looked tired, but there was something strong in her eyes. Hope. Elias closed the locket slowly. "She trusted someone would find him," he said softly. He placed the locket back carefully. Then he looked down at the baby again. "Looks like that someone was me." The baby moved slightly, making a small, quiet sound. Elias adjusted the blanket and made sure he was warm. Now came the next question. "What do I do with you?" Elias stood still for a moment, thinking. He had lived alone for many years. No family, no place to stay for long, just roads, towns, and silence. But this was different. This was not something he could walk away from. He looked toward the far distance where the nearest town would be. It was not close, but it was the only place where the baby could be safe, cared for, and maybe even reunited with someone who knew him. Elias made his decision. He mounted Ranger carefully, holding the baby close with one arm. Then he took the rope of the second horse and tied it loosely so it could follow behind. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's get moving." The horses began to walk slowly across the open land. The journey to town would take hours. The night was long, but Elias did not stop. He kept a steady pace, making sure the baby stayed warm and safe. From time to time, he spoke softly, even though the baby could not understand. "You're stronger than you look," he said once. "You held on this long." The baby slept most of the way, only waking for short moments. Each time, Elias made sure he was okay. As the night passed, the sky slowly began to change. The dark blue turned lighter, and the first light of morning appeared on the horizon. By the time the sun began to rise, Elias could see the outline of the town ahead. Small buildings, a few fences, smoke rising from chimneys. Life. Elias rode in quietly. The town was just waking up. A few people were outside, starting their day. Some of them looked at Elias with curiosity. A cowboy riding in early morning was not unusual, but a cowboy holding a baby? That was different. Elias stopped near a small building with a sign that read, "Doctor." He climbed down carefully and walked to the door. He knocked once. After a moment, the door opened. An older man stood there, surprised to see him. "Yes?" the man asked. Elias gently showed the baby. "Found him out in the canyon," Elias said simply. "He needs care." The doctor's expression changed immediately. "Bring him in, quick." Elias stepped inside. The room was warm and clean. The doctor quickly prepared a place for the baby and began checking him. "He's weak, but he'll be all right," the doctor said after a moment. "You brought him just in time." Elias nodded slightly. "Just in time." The doctor looked up at him. "Do you know where he came from?" Elias took out the locket and handed it over. "This was with him," he said. The doctor opened it and looked at the picture. "We'll find out," he said. "Someone must be looking for him." Elias did not say anything. He stood there for a moment, watching as the baby was taken care of. Safe. Finally, he turned toward the door. "Wait," the doctor said. "You can stay. You did a good thing." Elias paused. Then he shook his head slightly. "Just doing what needed to be done," he replied. He stepped outside into the morning light. The town was now fully awake. People moved around, talking, working, living their lives. Elias took a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, something felt different. He looked back once at the doctor's door. Then he walked toward his horse. His journey was not over. But now, it meant something more.